Technically speaking, technically speaking, I ain't talking vegan when I said that I've been eating, making money on the side, but I use it for the main. I'm speaking in code when I tech talk that financial freedom. Have a seat cause you gon' wanna sit up at my table, yeah. Plugged in that it, girl, IT with the cables, yeah. Network engineering is for you, it ain't no labels, yeah. Shaky with my passion, took a leap, it got me stable, yeah. Now I make 100K or better, paper couldn't fit a stapler, and I spend it on my passion cause I'm capable. Technically speaking, now I'm really talking vegan when I said that I've been eating, I've been technically speaking. Technically speaking, China white. When I've been said I've been technically speaking, said I've been technically speaking, China white.
So NAT, what is NAT? As I said before, it is network address translation. So really quick, with today's IP address space, it is impossible to provide a public IP, internet IP address to all of the devices. So we use private IP addresses, right? We use a scheme on private IP addressing, which is still not enough to give enough addresses. So we use NAT that helps us in tandem of IP addressing, which is network address translation, and it's to help us translate our public address that we can repeat. You know, I can have the same private address. So we can repeat the same private address. So I can have the same private address as you. However, when we decide to send data to each other or to the outside world, someone outside of our network, it changes into a public address. And it does so by NAT, right? And it changes back. So let's say that my address is, excuse me, my address is this 10.0.0.1, and your address is also 10.0.1.1. That's great because this is my network, and then over here is your network. But when we decide to speak out into the internet, you know, speak out and get on this Zoom, we're not going to use our private address actually going to come to our router, our gateway, and it's going to have a protocol NAT that translate our private address into a public address that is not used, that's on the internet that's currently being used. And our router table will have our router will have a NAT table, and it will map out these addresses. It'll say, okay, well, 10.0.0.1 is mapped to this. So in case anyone, not in case, but when someone sends data to me, they'll send it, but they'll send it to my private address. But when my router sees it, my router is going to say, oh, but it really goes to this private IP address, which is me. Okay, so essentially it's just translating addresses, turning private into public and public into private, right? Now, these address assignments or mappings can be static or dynamic, right? We can set it. We can say, hey, for 10.0.0.1, map it to 171.69.58. Whatever. We're going to map it one-to-one static. We already know static. We've configured static routes. Now, dynamic that means that it's a pool of numbers. It's a pool of IP addresses, and it's just being used, whichever one is not used is up in line. So 10.0.0.1, once it needs a public address, it'll just use the next available address out there, right? Or next available address that's in that pool. Okay, it's going to be, instead of a one-to-one mapping, it's a one-to-many. We can use whichever one is available to us. Okay, now when you want to configure NAT, want to deploy NAT, you have to define the inside interfaces and the outside interfaces. Basically, you're defining what's inside of a network and what's outside of a network. Which interfaces go to the internet from your router's perspective and goes into your private network. Which interface is that? Obviously, it's a good visual right here because we can see it's this interface and that interface, whether that's serial 0/0/0, or this is FA/0/2 or something. I don't know. But you're going to define which interfaces are outside of your network and inside of your network. Okay? As you can see here, inside can be defined as your network, outside can be defined as out of your network. And here's a nice little diagram here. Inside of the network, excuse me, and your outside of your network, your external network. So you are looking at, okay, so we have Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 0, then we have serial 0. So now we know which interfaces we need to have. Excuse me. And this tells you basically a little more about, the traffic, what's outside and what's inside. It should be kind of self-explanatory at this point, but it just kind of goes in a little more. And it's from your router's perspective. All right. So configuring that is literally first things first. What's my inside and what's my outside as far as my interfaces are concerned. Okay. Once you know that, then you're able to configure either a pool or static. Now we have static. Static, you start off going into, what does this say? Configuration mode, right? And then you say IP, start off with IP, NAT, inside source. Well, for static, you're going to put static, inside source static. And you're going to say, it's this address on this interface. You're going to keep it another inside, keep it configure the other interface, and you're going to configure that interface to be outside. Okay, so you're doing a static source, a static mapping. This is the static right here. I'm translating this to this. Okay, and I'm going to go into the interface, because you see it's configured. It's still configured. I didn't go into an interface to configure the inside source static. I told the router what's happening. I'm using that. So now I have to go into the interface that's inside and say that it's inside, and go into the interface that's outside and say that it's outside. Okay, that's why the first step is to figure out which interfaces are outside your network, inside your network, because the router needs to know, like, okay, so from your perspective, router, on FA0/1, that's going outside to the internet. That's out of our network. But FA0/0, that's in our network. That's the data that will be coming, excuse me, to our host.
Will be number 1 is TSU Team Hub. This is where all our hub information is at. This is where you'll go first, and you can ask questions here, create you a nice card with your name on it, and let us know what you're here, what your goals is, so we can help you accomplish that. Okay? The second board you would come up to is how to get a 6-figure job. This is my exact path on how I was able to break into tech and get a 6-figure tech job. Even when you got that job, or let's just say you are at a comfortable job, it may not be 6 figures, maybe, 90K, 80K, something in that sort. And now you're looking into making 6 figures in your business. You can use this board as well, so we can help you get to that goal with getting 6 figures in your business, okay, by utilizing technology. And the third one here that everyone mostly is at is the CCNA or NET Plus exam notes. All right. These are all the exam notes here. And we have it in our boards that you see where it has start, and you see our network fundamentals, network
to the other networking devices. To ensure that you did NAT correctly, you're going to use this command, show IP NAT translations. Okay. I would highly suggest you run this command multiple times and get a feel of it, because it's definitely gonna be on the exam. Now, as far as the pool, you're doing the same thing. You're going to configuration terminal mode, and you're going to say IP NAT, but this time you're going to say pool, and you're going to name pool. In this example, it's my_pool is how they name it, and you're going to give it the network and you have to put net mask, right? The network subnet mask, right? And you put the mask here. It's going to be a /24, but you put the pool. It's from 4.4.4.1 to 4.4.4.5, and the mask is going to be 255.255.255.0. Okay. Then once you do that, you go into you just hit enter. It's going to give you another line in configuration mode, and you put IP NAT inside source list, and you see static IP NAT inside source static. But for the pool, you're going to put IPNet inside source, and you're going to say the source comes from a list. The list is 1 or whatever you named it, whatever you want to put here. And because it's the first list, second list, whatever list you want to use. And the pool is my pool. Okay, so with at least with the pool, you're going to create that pool first. You're going to say, hey, this is the pool of addresses that we can use to do network address translations. And since you created that pool, that list already, you can go ahead and say, hey, we're going to turn that on. Excuse me. We're going to turn that on, and this is the source of the IP address because it's not static, so I'm giving you a list. So the only thing that's really interchangeable here is obviously the IP address and the net mask, and also the name of the pool, right? But these are the exact commands, which you'll have in your lab. Actually, let me not hit lab right now. Really quick. So that is NAT, right? That's network address translation, a way to translate private IP addresses into public IP addresses, and then vice versa, from public IP addresses to private IP addresses. Why do we do that? Because there's not enough IPv4 addresses. So yes, they have IPv6, but we don't even have to use IPv6 really because we have NAT. NAT helps us with private IP addressing, and then we're going to give everyone a private IP address and then translate their private IP address into unique addresses for them to use on the internet. And then from that unique address, it comes into their network and they get their private address. How does that happen? Through the protocol called NAT. All right, that's it. That's simple. That's done. How do you configure NAT? You configure it. You configure static, or you configure a pool. You can say, hey, here's 1-to-1 translation, or you can say, here's 1-to-many translations, depending on you as an architect. Okay. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is PAT, which is port address translation. Okay. Basically, we call it like NAT overload. And basically what it does is it allows one address to be associated with different addresses via port numbers. And let me see, can you see here on this example right here? It says that inside local address 10.6.1.2 is associated with port 2031. Right, and then the inside global address, as you can see, the private address, and then this is the global, which is the public address, is going to be mapped to 171.69.68.10 for the same port, right? 2031. And again, it's just going to go down. So it's just a way to further translate by using ports to send data, right? Ports to ports on your address so you can send it. And again, it's just another way to conserve IP addresses. Like, we have all these mechanisms. We honestly don't have to use IPv6 like that, because not only can you do private IP addressing, we use NAT, and now we have PAT. So it's kind of like, it's going to be a long time before we need to use IPv6, but we're using it anyway. It's just not, you just as a consumer don't know. But here we go. As the configurations, you are in the configuration terminal. Once again, you're going to put the same command starting off, IP NAT inside source, right? For PAT, because it is port address translation, it's 1-to-many, you are going to say a list, whatever the name of the list is, interface, and you're going to go into the interface and say overload. So NAT overload is usually, when someone says NAT overload, is associated with PAT, because it's overloading network address translations. So you want to do even more translation. We're going to translate it via your ports. We're going to add port numbers to your IP addressing. All right. And it's by the keyword overload. Okay. But this is the full command, the full syntax. I suggest you definitely make sure you understand it. The main takeaway is this keyword overload. Okay. You can remove all NAT translations from the NAT table by using clear IP NAT translation command.